This evening, as we begin, I would like to review what we studied in our last lecture because it's foundational for what we're going to deal with in our topic today. If you remember, we found that God married Israel at Mount Sinai. And He wanted Israel to be His only, to obey His laws, and to remain absolutely pure and uncontaminated from the surrounding nations. But we found in our study that very early in Israel's history, she apostatized from God. And Ezekiel chapter 16 as well as chapter 23 tells us that Israel became a harlot because she embraced the teachings and practices of the surrounding nations. The Bible calls these practices the abominations of the nations. In other words, Israel assimilated the abominations of the nations, and in this way, she became a harlot. She abandoned the husband of her youth. As we studied, she also fornicated with the kings of the earth, with the kings of different nations, forming political alliances. And instead of depending on God as her source of strength, she started depending on these alliances with other kings. We also noticed in our study that Israel covered herself or decked herself with silver and with gold to attract attention to herself. And as a result, God spoke in no uncertain terms to His unfaithful wife in Ezekiel chapter 16 and verse 32 by saying these words, "You are an adulterous wife who takes strangers instead of her husband." You see, she was playing the harlot. She was an adulterous wife, if you please, because she had the kings of the nations as lovers instead of the Lord her God. In Ezekiel chapter 16 and verse 30, God speaks even more graphically. He says, "How degenerate is your heart, says the Lord God, seeing you do all these things, the deeds of a brazen harlot." That word brazen in the Hebrew means to exercise autocratic control. It means to get one's way or to be domineering. In other words, Israel became a domineering harlot, wanting her own way and wanting to exercise control and dominion. We noticed in our study last time that Israel had daughters, daughter harlots, who shared her point of view and also assimilated the pagan practices of the surrounding nations. And we studied that Israel shed innocent blood. The blood of those who opposed her agenda were slaughtered and slain by Israel. And therefore God told Israel, "You are going to drink the cup of my wrath to the very dregs."